Up and over, taking the rocks. Let's go.
Up and over, rocks. South, head south.
Hey folks, Dave here, and welcome to a special interview all about Civil War history and using it to make games. I'm joined once again by Joel.
Hey everyone.
And Clark from Campfire Games, and specifically the Civil War game, War of Rights.
Hello everybody.
Now Clark, you are the historical advisor for this game, is that correct?
I am indeed the one and only.
Oh my gosh, you're like Dave's Indiana Jones. The historical advisor to a Civil War game. Like that's Dave, this is your Indiana Jones.
It belongs in a museum, Jim.
Yes, it is.
Oh man. Honestly, yeah, that's like, if I could pick a starting game dev position, historical advisor would be hard to turn down. That just sounds awesome.
Well, I was very glad to be able to take up the mantle when I was given the opportunity, and I've been having an absolute blast being able to take part.
How long now
Awesome.
have you been doing that?
Oh, it's been going on about a good 5 years now, yes. It's been decades almost by this point.
No, but back in about February of 2014 is when I first joined up with the group and with the company, and it's been a very fun road ever since.
I was going to say, it does seem like it has been quite the road, because we first interviewed you guys in, I want to say, 2015?
Exactly, November 2015.
Oh, whew. Memory came through for me for once.
Yes!
Joel and I were co-hosts on the Casual Shenanigans gaming podcast, which we just retired last year, but you guys were one of our first, like, real interviews, and it was so much fun to interview you guys back then when it was, I think, just past the Kickstarter or just before. Now I can't remember.
During the Kickstarter, actually.
That's
while
what
it was going on, while we were trying to raise up the initial funds to actually get this off the ground, and in part because of great folks such as yourself, we were able to get up to the goal of 110,000 at the time, or 100,000 actually was the goal. We got up to 110,000, and then more recently, when we finally finished off accepting crowdfunding opportunities before we launched to Steam Early Access, we raised up past $973,000 all told.
Man alive, that is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Everything that's been helping go towards the development of our little game here.
Followed by taxes, which leaves you a good $1.97. And we're ready
Pretty
to
much.
A little bit of a sore feeling. I was going to say, you can definitely tell who came out ahead there, because you guys are now officially launched into early access on Steam, and our podcast is retired. So congratulations to you guys for your successes.
Well, thank you. We do appreciate it, and we're looking to many more years of continuing to assuage the historical inclinations of the folks.
That's what I want to hear.
It makes me want to ask, like, how is the game going? Like,
It's going supremely well. We're very excited about everything that's going on. In fact, just today and throughout this weekend, we're going to be doing a 200 population server test to see just how well that might be arranged, and it went off without a hitch just today. So
that's awesome.
A lot to look forward to.
It seems like the base for your game, like the people playing it, you have a solid base of people that really get into it. Because when Dave and I played, just jumping in for the first time, it was like, I told Dave, I said, I'm in a reenactment right now.
Surprise!
It was amazing. I was cackling with joy and how much everyone was like so into it. And I was just like, yeah, the people who are playing, they're going to be playing this game for a long time.
Well, that is definitely the hope.
It warmed my heart, honestly.
Well, one of the biggest niches that we definitely aim for was the reenacting community, particularly the younger reenacting community, because this game not only serves as a base of entertainment, but also something for education as well, allowing a lot of people, especially that are perhaps into different periods of history or not even in history at all, to get immersed into it and have a very engaging way of getting into it and getting into, wow, what are these weapons, or what are these uniforms that I'm wearing? What are all the little details that are on it? And so that's part of the little incentive that we had with the amount of details and historical accuracy that we're trying to achieve with it.
That's awesome.
Clark,
really
you used the I word, immersion. It's all over now. I'm all on board.
I did. I used your keyword right there.
I love it.
I remember it from before.
For teaching wise, I'm not sure if you've ever played any of the Assassin's Creed game, but the one Assassin's
Absolutely.
Creed Origins, I think it was in Egypt. They had a really interesting mode that came out afterwards, and it made me, when you said that, it made me think, please make this for your game. But it was essentially a tour mode where you could just walk around and like listen to like commentary, recreate, like you could walk through the pyramids and things like that. Like, do you think that could ever be a thing in your guys' game? I remember Valve did that sometime for commentary for some of their games, but just like that for, historical reasons and just learning in a class, how cool it would be to go through, some of the map design, which is impeccable. Honestly, it's incredible. My wife and I we stayed in, what's the name of the place again now, Dave?
Harpers Ferry.
Harpers Ferry, yeah. We stayed there in a bed and breakfast. And then when we played the game, it was just like, oh my gosh, like
I know that place.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it was
I saw
incredible.
that building.
Yeah, I was there. I saw it here. Wait, no, I didn't. I ate here. But yeah,
It was less musket
Oh my
fire.
God, there's my credit card on the table. Jesus, they're good. No, well, we thank you very much for that. And actually, that is one of the definite end goal plans of the game, is to have a walkthrough mode where you can go to all the different battlefields that we're going to be featuring, and included on each of those is going to be narration at different points on the map. So for instance, if you walk up to the Pry house, then you'll have the chance to actually learn about, what the importance of the house was, how it was important to General Letterman, who was the head of the medical department at the time, and who used it along with General McClellan as headquarters. And it was partially because of his time at the Pry House that he came up with the way that the medical corps got transformed into. So there's all sorts of interconnectedness throughout all of it that we're hoping to achieve, and including hopefully maybe even an encyclopedia mode for people to use, accessible through the menu, so that they can actually look up like what all the different weapons are showcased in the game and the histories behind them. All sorts of stuff.
Awesome. Seriously, I'm grinning over here. That sounds incredible.
That's what I'm here for. Make you nice and grinning.
And I imagine that probably feels pretty good for you as a historical advisor to put all this effort into helping get all these things right, and then to have a mode where it's like, hey, let's just focus on all this stuff we got right. Look at what we did.
Oh, well, that's going at it for me, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into all the different models. For instance, making sure that we're having the right kind of cartouches, or for those that aren't aware, the stamps that the different armories would put on the weapons. So making sure that we have the right cartouches for the right weapons, the right period. Making sure that, for instance, the houses. I had a great old time several years ago looking up what the way of Victorian rain gutters were like. What they were made out of, who made them, who would usually have them, the different kinds of furniture that would have been featured at the time, the different handwriting styles. There's a lot that goes into all the props and just the general mode of the game, the UI of the game. So it's all been very integral, and it's definitely going to be fun for people to actually be able to have a better showcase of all those little details.
That's I'm kicking myself for not looking at the gutters more closely. Last time I was there. Why is
God
that so
damn, I missed out the rain gutters.
Wait, Joel,
Seriously,
you
that's
haven't stared at the
that's
gutters?
so
Because I
good.
definitely have.
I know. I'm like, damn it! I missed out on that history.
Well,
that's
another
so-
thing is looking at the style of the lampposts in Harpers Ferry. They still have period examples, or recreations at least, of the lampposts that were used at the time. The not the gas, but the oil lampposts. The style of them. So we recreated that. We recreated the style of the pathways from the time. The Jefferson staircase that was there, the old staircase that was originally carved out of the rock in Harpers Ferry in 1835, I want to say, if I'm recalling correctly. So, all those little details, what they look like, and trying to get that into the game for folks to enjoy.
Honestly, even without the touring modes, when you hop into the game, you can just tell, like, wait a second, this is more than just a game loosely based around a time period. You guys really have done your homework. And when that shines through in just the basic multiplayer modes, I think that's a pretty big testament to the amount of research you guys have done.
Well, yeah, that being said, speaking of which, that reminds me of the frustration that comes into some of trying to get those details right. Because, for instance, yet again, going to Harpers Ferry, just talking about the railroad bridge that goes over Harpers Ferry was absolute hell in a handbasket trying to get right. Because the damn thing got destroyed and rebuilt about 16 different times during the Civil War. So trying to get the right iteration correct, because just prior to the siege of Harpers Ferry, there had been a flood that took it out. Prior to that was the Confederates blowing it up when they left Harpers Ferry in late 1861, after they took out all the stuff from the armory that hadn't been destroyed. So there's just all sorts of fun details trying to make sure we get right.
When you guys look at one of your locations, how do you dig through so many different layers of history and find the right slice to recreate for the time period for War of Rights? Like, how do you sort through so much information to get right there?
That is a very good question, and it's really an amalgamation of different things. So, to begin with, when it comes to creating one of the maps, one of the things that we start with is by doing a merger between modern satellite imagery of the different locations, and then doing a merger of that with the period military maps that were made, for instance, by General Carman just after the war in 1867, as well as all sorts of different sketches and what have you that were done, as well as looking at not just maps, but also, for instance, woodcuts of the time by the Harper's Weekly magazines, or the different other newspaper publications from the time, looking at soldiers' accounts to, for instance, get what kind of crops were in certain fields. What kind of foliage was there, what sort of birds they were hearing. All those different things go into map making and us trying to get it right as best as possible. And we're also very much helped by the photographs that were taken just after the battle by Andrew Gardner and the other prominent photographers from the time. That is not the right word. Photographers from the time. There we go. I know English.
Photographist sounds pretty important, though. I kind of like that.
It does. It's like the next step up. It's even better. But, taking an amalgamation of all these different factors to be able to recreate the maps as correctly as possible is how we try and do it. In fact, we just recently updated the Burnside Bridge using an Alexander Gardner photograph taken of that area.
So when you guys find a legit photograph of a location that you haven't seen before, I imagine that's really exciting to fill in some gaps.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hell yeah. I mean, because, for instance, there is one trouble that I'm having right now trying to track down information on a church that has since been taken down just a little bit after the Civil War, and there's just absolutely nothing left of it short of the graveyard outside of South Mountain. So I'm trying to do my best, even, contacting the record keepers of the archdiocese that was in control of it, trying to see if there was any descriptions by the parishioners or anything like that to try and get things correctly made.
The military maps you were talking about earlier, where were those things kept? Like, what happened to those? Like, how do we still have those? Like, who was in charge of going, we got to lock these up and put these for future use? Like, where the heck what happened? Like, that's just kind of crazy that we have those.
Well, that's a very good question, and we have a lot of that to thank by the Library of Congress, for instance, is where a lot of old military records are kept, not to mention the fact that there is quite a bit of importance behind maps during the period, obviously, because this is what all the generals are having to base their troop positioning and decisions as to how to set up the artillery off of. So there was a huge amount of kind of commercially made maps of the areas and of the general United States made just prior to the Civil War, that almost every family, especially more out in the country, had just to keep track of world events and just have as kind of general referencing. And you saw a lot of those maps actually getting taken by the soldiers for use of the generals because there was such a dearth of general location maps. And that's also where the U.S. engineers and the CS engineers also came into play, where they would be doing maps on the fly, and there would be a whole team behind every general helping to actually create a map from scratch, where each person, kind of like with the wood blocks used by the Harper's Weekly illustrators, excuse me, there would be a whole team that would just take one section of the map, and then they would each do their section, and then they put it together at the end to get one large map for the generals to use, and then reprint from as well. So a lot of those maps, after they were made, either on the fly, during the battlefield, beforehand, maps that the U.S. engineers had made prior to the Civil War. So there was definitely quite a bit of topographical information out there, both by military and by civilian contractors. So that's what a lot of those maps were used by. Since then, for instance, when we were doing our East Coast trip back in 2016 or 2017, I forget. No, 2016. Yep. We went to, for instance, the Virginia State House and got the records from them to some of the older maps from the period, trying to get more references on Harpers Ferry as well as Shepherdstown, and then doing the same thing using the records kept at the Maryland State Library, or yet again the U.S. Library of Congress. So there's no shortage in terms of accessibility to some of these things for those that know where to look, and it's very simple and oftentimes free to look as well.
That's awesome.
That's some dangerous knowledge for me, because now I kind of want to go on like a across the coast.
He's going to go on a spirit quest, guys.
Yeah, that was just a green it wasn't really necessarily game related, but I was just like, now I need to know that part of history.
Where do I find these maps?
That's what I'm here for.
So, like, when you guys first started, pitching this idea to make this game, like, how many people were involved, like, at the very, very beginning? Like, I don't honestly know, how it all started. Like, was it just from a very small crew and it's gotten bigger, or has it stayed pretty much about the same from the start?
Yes, it did start very small, as most of these indie projects do. And the very beginning of it was where Trusty Jam and Fancy Sweet Roll, the two originators and co-creators of the company.
They're legal names, of course. They're full legal names.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Don't ask me to try and pronounce their Danish names. They already laugh in my face when I try. But Mads Larsen, as well as his very good friend, whose name is now completely escaping me, unfortunately, they were good friends for a long time, and they had decided that they wanted to do a game about the American Civil War. Or at least, about the gunpowder period in general. Mm-hmm. And it was Mads, also known as Trusty, that was particularly a fan of the Civil War because of watching old movies like Gods and Generals and things like that, Glory, what have you. And so he was the one that convinced Fancy to get into the Civil War particularly, but he was happy because it was gunpowder in general, so it worked out. Nice. And so since then, they then kind of pared it down to deciding to cover the Maryland campaign of 1862 due to how much of a climactic and game-changing campaign it was. And from there, they started kind of just gathering volunteers here and there to help out with the development of it, including myself once it got to about 2014. And it had already been in production 2 years from that time.
Man.
So this has been a very long time coming, and it's just gotten a little bit bigger over time. So now we're give or take around 10 to 13 people in our team from all over the world, and we're all chipping in on our part to help try and make this game a success and a reality.
That's a true passion project right there, when you're Danish and you're like, I'm going to make a game about the American Civil War. That's a lot of work to take on, for sure.
Absolutely.
When did it come out of I guess early access or whatever? Or
it is still in early access just yet. It's got out of just being to those who donated during the campaign somewhat more recently, within the last few months, is when we finally actually released it to the general world and universe of Steam. And
how did that feel? Getting to that point, from just a long development process, and finally going, all right, here we go, people.
Here we go. Let's hope for the best.
All you Steam cheapskates, here you go.
Well, it was definitely a very glorifying in terms of, we're finally happy that we're able to get to this point, even though there's even more to go, as well as a little bit worrisome as well, because, we're not sure how the general populace will take this, considering that admittedly this is quite a niche genre that we're kind of slotting ourselves into, because this is a historical and a historically accurate game that isn't a run and gun shooter like perhaps most have become commonplace and used to.
More like a run and reload shooter.
So this isn't the sort of game where you're going to be able to just run and gun. This is a game where you are going to be sitting there loading your rifle for a good 20 seconds, as per what the usual time frame was with these muzzle loading weapons. So it was a bit of a give and take, but we're very happy with how it has been received.
I know that Joel and I had been chomping at the bit for a while to finally, get in there and try it for ourselves. And I was really just gratified to see that at the same time that I was working on my first impressions video, there were a bunch of channels out there trying that as it hit early access, and everyone's impressions seemed to be about the same. Like, where did this come from? What is this? And why is this so much fun? I saw so many positive impressions around the early access launch. That was really great to see.
Absolutely. We were very happy with the amount of people that really enjoyed themselves, and we hope that they can continue to enjoy themselves, especially as we get to actually finalizing some more of the end games features and different points that we're trying to hit. Because as it stands at the moment, the game is still only featuring, for instance, just the infantry branch, but we're hoping eventually to also add on things like artillery and cavalry and expanding the amount of access that people will have to the command structure and giving more support. So
awesome.
all sorts of things like that. For instance, something that you guys perhaps didn't have a chance to partake in more recently in your last video was how officers, for instance, now have the ability to use binoculars to see very far away towards where the enemy might be.
You hear that, Joel? They're going to give me so much virtual authority. You're going to hate it so much. You're going to hate it so much.
We're going into dangerous territory, man.
You will call me sir. So, Clark, I wanted to ask you personally, as the historical advisor, there's so
now
much.
I'm in trouble.
Let's talk about you for a while. Let's really get in depth.
Let's talk about Clark, shall we? Yes.
I was definitely curious because you've already talked about how broad the research has to be for this game, from the locations to the bird sounds to the weapons. Which one of those areas is like your personal passion? Like, what can you go on about when it comes to this time period?
Well, I can definitely say that my biggest thing is certainly the uniforms of the period is one of my biggest passions, just on top of my general interest and passion in the historical period in general. It's a lot of fun looking at the development of it over time, from how the United States uniform used to be, even as far back as the Continental period, and then looking at its progression over time, and looking at actual period examples of it as well, being able to actually see some of that. For instance, when we were on our East Coast trip, one of the other places we went to was obviously the Smithsonian, and we immediately headed our way to the Civil War displays, where they had tons of different examples of uniforms and weaponry from the period that we got to enjoy. The different uniforms that are exhibited at, for instance, the Chancellorsville National Park. They have this beautiful both lower and upper story there that has all sorts of different examples, and I think it's there that they have the example of General Lee's or General Jackson's, I think it's General Lee's, camp equipment and some of his uniforms. Or no, they have the uniforms of General Jackson, the camp equipment of Lee. So, it's some really awesome stuff that we're able to see going on that trip and getting a lot of reference material from all that.
I imagine you've got to be pretty thankful that this is a time period where photography was becoming more and more common, because that's got to help with stuff like the uniforms as well.
Oh goodness gracious, yes. I mean, this is still the period of still being black and white. So when you're
Sure.
talking about a lot of the Zouave units, for instance, Zouaves, for those that don't know, being the French-inspired uniforms, or at
Is
least
that how
more
you
so
pronounce
than
that? Zouaves?
all the uniforms were considered. Yeah, it's based off of the Zouaves that were down in French Algeria in the 1840s and late 1840s, early 1850s.
Sorry, that was a complete derail there, but I had like
Nope,
that moment
not
of
at all.
clarity from playing years of Total War games. I was never sure how to pronounce that. Zouaves. I'm gonna
Yep.
make a mental note.
There you go. Yeah, and they were a big hit over here in America. When they got done in the Algerian War, they came over to the Americas on a world tour, as part of a world tour, basically going, look how strong and impressive we are. We have French, Algerian, Zouaves, yes. And there was a lot of the different gentlemen's clubs that were what state militias had become by that point, that looked at those uniforms and went, "Guy, those guys are so cool. We want to be just like them." So just prior to the Civil War, you had all these different state militia groups that took on examples of these Zouave uniforms. These big baggy pajama pants and things like that. They became, even at the time, known as pajama troopers because of it. So there was various examples, and they were particularly known for their completeness of drill and etiquette and all that good stuff. So they were very prominently considered at the time.
True
But as the
gentlemen
Civil
warriors.
War began, oh, absolutely, as taking over a Bedouin nation can be. But they were oftentimes emulated by these different state militias, and then they realized very quickly that these very outstanding uniforms became outstanding targets on the battlefield, so they quickly got rid of them to instead just go with the regular uniforms instead. Most of the time.
I feel like that would be the kind of thing that I would go through. Like, look how sharp these uniforms look. These look great. Approved. Let's get these deployed to everybody. Oh, we're giant targets. But
Oh,
man, we look
everybody's
good.
dying. What a terrible idea. Excuse me.
That parade last week looked so good.
Yeah, everybody's dead now, but last week's parade, it was top notch, I'll tell you.
Sure
I
hope
feel
we got
like
some photos.
This leads well into a question: how difficult is it to balance history elements with game elements? Because this is always something me and Dave are always arguing about. Dave's level of immersion in history he can just look through his lenses to see a wonderful game, where I'm going, you maybe didn't have to use left click, right click, shift to climb up a ladder. Like, so for when you guys, when it was developing the game, like any kind of challenges with that, or that you guys found that even like surprised you, going, all right, maybe we should dial that back, or actually let's push a little bit further on this because this makes sense, because this is fun, or this is too tedious.
Absolutely so, because that is actually one of my jobs, not just to research this, but also to try and help give that balance to both the playability per it being a game, and the historical accuracy standpoint. So when it comes to all the different elements of the game that are being implemented, whether you're talking about the UI, the different functions and features of the game, the uniforms, the equipment, the weaponry, helping to not just research all of that for them, but also to try and give my 2 cents when it comes to, hey, this would be an awesome idea to add as a feature, or to say, hey, while that is kind of a nice bit of playability, perhaps here's how we can compromise to make it a bit more historically accurate. So
That's awesome.
That's one of the goals of mine as the historical advisor, is not just to inform, but also to advise in my limited and capacity to help make it all that much better and also playable, because I can understand it from the gamer's standpoint rather than some musty fellow with about 40 years of historical advice. And last game I played was a bit of hopscotch back in the 40s. No.
Remember the thing with the hoops and the sticks? Good times.
Yeah, it was a great old time then. That was simpler times. No, I do understand from the aspect of a gamer what it means to have something that's playable, and I want to help people have that too, while also having something that's educational and historically accurate as well.
Yeah, I
So
found that
it's a fine line.
yeah, I found that even just the very first time trying to play it, because I think Dave was still at work and I was at home working from home, so I basically play this game. And no, but like when I got in, I was surprised that, again, I love history, but I'm just not very good when it comes to memorizing everything. And so it's just like
Oh, absolutely.
I was able to get into the game and like play and understand things pretty darn well right off the bat. Like it's not like I didn't know all the advanced tactics and stuff like that, but I think that that's a testament because obviously a game like this, people who are going to be really into this, like the really hardcore, are obviously going to be people that are really into the Civil War reenactments, knowing about the history. People like Dave. I mean, like that's going to be your hardcore crowd. But if you are able to capture some of the people that are like, oh, I am into learning about history and that
I'm
kind of stuff. And I've
intrigued
always
at
been-
least. Yeah.
but are a little bit terrified when it comes to certain things that are like, wow, I've got to learn to do this and I got to hit this button and that button and this, like I don't know all this, I can't speak that. Like when I dropped in, I was hilarious. I had someone drilling orders and I was like, yes, sir, yes, sir. But it was amazing because they were all like, they were both hardcore and also extremely welcoming. And I just found the UI actually did a really good job at kind of explaining kind of what I should be doing or where I should be going. Now I didn't do very well, but I had a great time doing poor.
I love that.
It was a blast. It was great.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. And like I was saying before, while the game does have a particular niche that it does particularly help to showcase for in terms of the people that are, the really hardcore, like you're mentioning, the people that are reenactors themselves of the Civil War that know a lot of the Napoleonic drill and what all it means when somebody says right shoulder shift arms or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we definitely want to make sure that people understand that you don't have to have that background to be able to play this game. And that's where, for instance, like you were mentioning, the UI that we have has, if you were to press F1 while you're in the drill camp or while you're playing the game, you can actually see what all the different hotkeys are that we have currently to help you on the learning curve to getting a better understanding. Not to mention the fact that, yet again, as you were mentioning, those that are on the more hardcore end that have a bit more intimate knowledge into the period and the tactics, Napoleonic tactics and drill manuals, are very welcoming and very much eager to help you understand
Oh yeah.
the different commands that are in there. And the best part of this game comes out when you actually join in with what's known as companies. In other games, you can oftentimes find clans. In our game, they're more structured around companies, which is one of the organizational forms that was used at the time for 100 men.
Which pleases
there
me,
would be
by
10
the way.
companies
that
in a regiment.
It's called companies. I love that so much.
Always helpful. Always glad to.
Calm down.
I'm there. I'm there right now.
So instead of clans, we have companies, and by joining a company, you're able to enjoy that command structure that we have currently implemented in the game, and as I said, will be expanded later on. And you can take part in the different training sessions that people have to help you get a bit more entertained and immersed into this game, not to use the terrible I word or anything.
I can't handle this much I word. Honestly, the voice chat that works so well in the game is a big help too, because a few times you can just be like, sir, how do I shoulder arms? And they just quickly tell you, press this button. Hurry up.
Hurry up, lad. We don't have much time left for your dilly-dallying.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yep, there's all sorts of people that are definitely out there to also enjoy the game right along with you and help impart some of their knowledge for you. And we're very appreciative for everybody, whether they're the hardcore folks that have been with us for several years now in the continuing development process, or the newer folks that have just only recently joined up with the Steam Early Access. And we hope that everybody can get together to enjoy what we have to offer for them.
So with this, the success of you guys, it's launching and it seems like it's doing pretty well. Do you guys find yourself thinking, obviously you guys are creating more stuff and patching things and adding new features and all sorts of stuff and talking about artillery and everything. Do you think you'll be able to, continue on for a potential sequel at all? Like,
well,
or even just like even console stuff, because I know it was on Unreal, right? Unreal Engine, right?
CryEngine.
CryEngine,
yeah,
sorry.
we're using CryEngine at the moment, and
Gotcha.
it's definitely something that we've been asked many times as to whether or not we might be interested in doing other campaigns, like the very famous Gettysburg campaign, which originally wasn't chosen by Trusty because he just didn't care for how overdone it tended to be. And is even still, or perhaps going into like the Overland campaign, what have you, or one of the Western campaigns, perhaps. And it was definitely a possibility that we might do something in the far future, but we have a lot of the base game here that we still have to get done with before we could even consider doing anything like that. Because, like I said, there's a lot of the game that we're working on currently that we still want to make sure that we have done and polished for a final release before we even go into anything else. Not to mention the fact that, just the Antietam map is a work of almost half a decade, if not more now. So it's a big process just even thinking about trying to do Gettysburg or something like that, because we're having to start right from scratch.
Yeah. And I imagine there's only so many assets you guys can reuse for each location. You have some basic houses and trees, but there's always, those hero objects that a battlefield is known for that you've got to consider the time for your artists to create those and the developers to program them and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the problems too, in that we don't have too much in the way of kind of generic buildings, because especially with the Antietam location, there is fortunately a lot of documentation for the different buildings. So almost every single drop of buildings and different entities on the Antietam map, let alone the town of Harpers Ferry, is period correct and fully enterable, at least for the Antietam battlefield, and possibly for the South Mountain one as well. So there's pretty much all the buildings are custom to the actual period buildings. And when it comes to Harpers Ferry, there's a little bit more in regards to more kind of generic buildings, but at the same time, there is a lot of different storefronts, the White Horse Tavern that was outside the Arsenal buildings themselves, the different buildings that were in the hoteliers that were just next to the railroad bridge, the end of the bridge on the Harpers Ferry Peninsula. So there's all sorts of different buildings there that are, again, completely custom to and not at all generic.
It almost sounds like the more generic buildings you guys are able to use, all that means is now we have more time to make the unique ones. You can add more of those to the list.
Exactly. Yep. Oh god, what's it called? The Mason building.
Yeah.
Like the Freemasons building that was there in downtown Harpers Ferry. The Elks Lodge that was there. All sorts of stuff.
I am curious. Basically, as the team's history police is how I'm going to describe your position. Has there been any kind of like glaring error that you've found where you're like, guys, we've got to fix this because someone's going to call us out on this?
Yes. And this is, again, where a lot of our community comes into play to, if I, on a few occasions, might have something get overseen, because unfortunately I am not the know-all be-all of Civil War knowledge.
Guys, he's
really
just a man.
I'm just a man.
It's only human.
That's where very much fortunately our community can come in to also help out, and we're very appreciative of that and are always looking for that sort of feedback from folks, because again, we want to make sure that we're getting it right the first time, and on the occasions when we're not, we are right there waiting for our community members to speak up and make note of it so that we can see about getting that changed in future. For instance, we early on, I made the mistake of thinking that there weren't any of the Native American troops for both sides that were available at the Battle of Antietam, but I was thankfully corrected on that point by some members of our community, including Red Vito, who mentioned that actually there were various Native American troops that were active on the battlefield at the time, and here's some examples of them. And so making sure that we're going to have examples like that available is going to be very handy for us.
See, you're learning, and now we're learning, and now everybody's learning.
Exactly.
This is just good stuff.
Everybody's learning. We're all having a good time.
I mean, honestly, just from even just the way you talk, I think it's I think it's commendable just for the fact for how long you guys have been working on it and just to show the passion you guys have into it. I think that's awesome to, it's nice to see games like this do well, and I hope it continues to, do well and exceed you guys' expectations to, for just the player base and, I mean, you guys put a lot into it. I mean, I've worked on a film for a long time too, and I've done Kickstarter stuff, so I kind of have an idea of just that, what it feels like to really, put everything into it. And, has it been pretty rewarding to see, various people or just from the community just go like, wow, it's awesome that people really appreciate that segment, or maybe it's something that, you didn't really think about, like, wow, people really love this stretch of road for some reason, or this texture, this tree. You're like, hey, that person who spent, a crazy amount of hours and, whatever life kind of threw at the time while you guys are developing, it was like, oh, it's rewarding to see people really, grab onto it.
Absolutely. Every day I'm absolutely floored that I've had the privilege to be part of this project, and I'm very proud of the work we've been able to accomplish so far, and even more so proud for what lies ahead in our futures, and for the future of our community as well. I'm so looking forward to all of their feedback and the daily feedback that we get from people that are enjoying our game, and all the great things that they have to say about it, and the constructive criticism that they have to say about it. We're every day floored by their involvement and their passion, and it is a awesome thing for us to enjoy in response.
Oh, absolutely. I think when you guys as developers are working on this project that you're actually passionate about, everyone can tell that, and the community just kind of feeds off of it for sure, I think.
Yeah, and as much as we are trying to be there for our community is there for us too.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to keep you forever, Clark, and I think on that that hopeful note for the future, that's a good place to wind things down. What do you think, Joel?
I mean, I only have one last really important question. I feel like everyone's just
yeah, what is this going to be?
To know when is Battle Royale coming? I'm sorry. Just kidding. Don't kill me.
Or better yet, the zombie plague mode. Yeah.
When does the grappling hook and the wall running come into play here?
Very soon. Absolutely.
I wish you guys could do an April Fool's where it's like literally just you're randomly playing and like zombies attack out of nowhere. That'd be amazing.
See, I keep on trying to suggest different April Fool's jokes, and they go, no, we're not going to do that. I'm like, aw.
You're going to have people with pitchforks outside your house.
At this point.
Remember that passionate community? Yeah, they're all coming for you now.
They're passionate about our deaths.
Man.
It's going to be great fun, absolutely.
This is so much fun to just talk about this. You guys are doing a great job, and it's great to talk about some of the work that's been done so far and some of the work that is coming up. Joel, thanks for joining us as well.
Sure. Appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
For now, thank you guys for watching, and make sure to check out War of Rights, which is available in early access right now over on Steam.